What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Back Pick Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Thomas. Today's guest is Kellen Lee. Kellen is a former collegiate catcher. He won a Gold Glove at UC San Diego. He is now the mental skills coach for the Seattle Mariners. We dive into a bunch of mental stuff, not only from a player perspective, but also from a coaching perspective. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this. I hope you enjoy it. The Back Pick Podcast and the Catching Academy are happy to be partnered with All Star Sports, who we think does the best job of taking care of catchers. You can go to their website and use our code CatchingAcademy10 and get 10% off anything site-wide. So give us the beginnings here. We got a nice combo in you today. A former catcher, now a mental skills coach. Something I think is very undervalued and underappreciated, I think at all levels, but definitely at the younger levels for sure. So talk a little bit about your upbringing in baseball and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, no, first of all, I could be more excited to break it down with you. Again, like you said, as a former catcher and given what I do now, looking forward to this conversation. So, yeah, I think my story, I played baseball growing up, ever since I could walk. Played every sport under the sun when I was a kid. But when I got to high school, ended up just playing football and baseball, and truthfully didn't really become a catcher until a little bit later, probably around age 13 or 14. Context, I wore glasses and I couldn't wear the mask, and that's kind of where it all started. I got my contacts, and my coach was like, have you ever tried catching? I'm like, no. He's like, well, you kind of move around a little bit, I think you can figure it out. So I got thrown back there, and I never turned back, never got another normal looking glove, if you will, the rest of my playing career. So yeah, so I played throughout high school, and then played at Palomar Junior College, go Comets, and then played at UC San Diego, go Tritons. Um, I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of great catching guys growing up. Buck Taylor at Palomar, and really learned a lot about just the nuances of the game. And then when I got to UC San Diego, I was fortunate enough to be just on an unbelievable team. And really, this is kind of where my career ended up going the direction that it ended up going. Our coach Dan O'Brien at UC San Diego did an unbelievable job of introducing myself and rest of my teammates, the entire program, to the mental side of the game, the mental side of performing. And I truthfully reached a level of performance that I never even thought was possible for myself. So one of the proudest accomplishments of my career, just a humble brag, I did win a Gold Glove in college for my play behind the plate. Like, it was one of the coolest things I've ever got to do, and I attribute a lot of that success and a lot of success I had defensively and offensively to being able to focus on the right thing at the right time. And really, when I graduated college, worked for a couple years on staff at Santa Clara University as the ops guy, and I saw the coaches kind of do their thing, and I really contemplated going into coaching. But then I realized, I'm like, I think this mental performance stuff is for me. And I ended up getting my master's degree in sports psychology, ended up getting a PhD in performance psychology. And then before I even got into professional baseball and kind of bring it up to speed of where I am today, I did mental skills training with the United States Army for 3 years. Got to work with an unbelievably cool population there. Really honed in my craft, being able to like teach these concepts to people, and really stepping outside of the baseball world was best for me as a professional. Being able to like coach these skills to people that I don't really understand what they do, to be honest, when it comes to the military. And then back in 2020, started my career in professional baseball. Started working with the San Francisco Giants organization. Spent 3 years there, and then I'm going on my third year with the Seattle Mariners, as a mental skills coach. So for those listening that aren't necessarily familiar with my role, at the long and the short of it is I go around primarily the minor leagues to mentally prepare guys to compete on a nightly basis, but also get them mentally ready to compete in the major leagues. So I work with all our pitchers, all of our position players. As a former catcher, I definitely gravitate towards our catchers and our catching guys, and get in the mix there. But the cool part is, as someone who played and comfortable on the field, I get in there, hitting fungos, throwing bullpens, throwing BP. That's not bullpens, definitely not bullpens. But I have caught bullpens in a pinch, which helps out our guys a little bit. But the long and the short of it, I'm a baseball coach who just addresses the mental side of the game, and that's really how I fit within the organization. And I'm fortunate enough with the Seattle Mariners to be able to really live out those two roles of being able to talk the game, but also talk the mental game, which is it couldn't we couldn't have imagined a more perfect role for me at this point in my career.
So cool. So when you were at UC San Diego and you said Coach O'Brien kind of introduced some mental skills stuff, did he bring somebody in that kind of affected you, or was it more of like they were really in tune to it?
You know, we had a couple people come in and speak to us, but it was really just like the culture that he created across the entire program. It was, we're gonna train really hard so that we're confident on game day. And some of those hard training days were really really challenging for us as players. But I know it extracted the best version of us, and to be able to show up on game day. Just talking about the importance of like focusing pitch to pitch. And at the time, I didn't really understand like the magnitude or the gravity of like how truly powerful that is. Until I, got all the education out of the way and really just being able to have conversations with players nowadays, like that to me is one of the biggest superpowers that players can adopt, is this ability to truly focus pitch to pitch. We talk about playing the game one pitch at a time, but it's really what is required to do that is to be able to manage those 15-ish seconds between every pitch and be able to lock in completely on the task at hand. And I think, like, again, we can dive into the nuance on the catching side, but I think it's even more important for those catchers to be able to do that. But I think really that concept rings true for really any position, whether you're on the mound, behind the plate, or at the plate, or on defense. I think that principle of being able to manage that time between pitches so that you're able to focus on the task at hand. Like what is that pitch asking you to do in that moment? That's an incredibly valuable skill. So like I said, we would introduce a lot of concepts. We'd throw around a lot of these concepts. We'd talk about the mental game almost every day. It was just like it was a woven into like the fabric of the entire program, and that's really just sparked my curiosity. I'm like, man, like there's definitely something to this, because I've experienced it myself, but I just saw some of my teammates in our team reap the benefits of being able to utilize and lean on some of these mental performance techniques and skills.
No, it's awesome. And I think, we've got young guys in here, our athletes are kind of between 10 and 20, and feel like we're missing something in terms of giving them some of that, mental skills training. But I will tell you what, like, it's difficult to sell them on it. So, I mean, I think like my first question to you is like, you're attacking a high school kid, for example, who needs to really understand this. Whether they're succeeding or not, they're still going to need to understand this mental training. What's your first step in terms of like almost a sales pitch to get guys to understand this?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And this I think would ring true for no matter who I'm talking to, whether I'm talking to a coach, a player, a parent, a professional player. Uh, I really just simply ask them a very easy question, and a lot of the listeners have probably heard this, there's a ton of power to it. It's simply asking, like, okay, from 0 to 100%, like, how much of the game of baseball is mental? Like, give me a number. And I have asked that question hundreds of times, trust me, to individuals, to groups, to coaches, no matter who the audience is. I don't know if I've ever gotten an answer that's like less than 50 or 60%. Like, that's on the low end.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I just this past weekend I went to my son's little league and I did a little bit of a coaches clinic and kind of introduced some of this stuff to the coaches. And in that small pocket of population, and it's just fresh in my head, in that small pocket of coaches, I didn't get an answer under 70%. And that rings true even at the highest level. Our coaches in the Mariners organization, our players, they'll agree with that. And what's wild to me is, though I've gotten the same type of answers, again, north of 50 on the low end percent, but it's usually in like the 70-75%. They believe the game is mental. It's amazing to me that we spend almost 99% of our time training the physical side and almost completely disregard the mental side. And don't get me wrong, like, my job is a mental skills coach. I get paid to train the mental side of the game. That is my job description. That is what I get paid to do. And I would never tell a player that, hey, if you believe the game is 80% mental, you should train it 80% of the time. Like, I would never say that, because the physical game is incredibly important. But I think where the marriage is most important to understand is that whatever you're doing physically, there's a mental component that's attached to it. You're always thinking about something when you're doing something physically. And there's no separation between the mental and physical game. So if you're able to train the both at the same time, you're going to reap the benefits because sure, you can go do meditation or you can do some self awareness by journaling and really understand what's going on between the ears and directly, specifically train the mental side of the game. But there are ways to find you can find ways to train the physical game and the mental game simultaneously, because when you're playing, it's happening simultaneously at the same in that context too. So it's really important to understand that, like, whether you're, for the catchers, throwing the ball to second base or getting on the two knees to block a ball or back pick into first base or calling a pitch for your pitcher, you're also thinking about something. And being able to dial in your mind and your body at the same time is incredibly valuable. So challenging yourself to be able to train both the physical and the mental at the same time, that's really the money's made. So to answer your question, like, the best way to get the buy-in and the sales pitch is to use their answer and go like, well, you're telling me the game is 70% mental, so like, let's find a way to train even just a little bit. Let's move that needle a little bit. um, because most people train probably less than 10% of the time. And I'm, like I said, I would never tell them to train 75% of the time of their time that they train the game. But it's like, let's do a little bit more and just like close that gap a little bit, because you're leaving at the end of the day, you're leaving so much potential on the table if you're not training focus or confidence or like breathing techniques or really anything that falls into this category of the mental game. You're just leaving a lot of potential on the table, and that rings true for, no matter what level you're talking to. And at the end of the day, players want to get better, and if that's their way to get better, then let's get after it in that particular way, because they are truly leaving potential on the table.
I love that. And obviously, if they're have the ability to work with somebody that can help them through the process is great. What is like first steps in terms of, hey, I really want to focus on my mental game? What's your first step of advice? Is it just recognizing where you're at, journaling, things like that, or is there actual things that you would recommend implementing, earlier rather than later?
Yeah, if you've done no like formal training, I think the best way to start is any way to build your own self-awareness, because it's impossible to know where to go unless you know where you're at first. And that goes with awareness of your physical skill set, of your mental skill set, understanding like where you are as a player, or even coaches too, or coaches listen to this too. Like, I'm sure the coaches also have goals and what they want to accomplish. It's like you have to understand where you're at first to be able to put a plan in place to be able to achieve, or yeah, at least take a step forward towards where you want to go. um, but like you said, I think journaling is an excellent way to build that self awareness, to just to understand where your thoughts are, get your thoughts out on paper so you can see them objectively and understand how to manage those thoughts. Are those thoughts working for me, or are they not working for me? And I'll give a little shout out to, like, on the side of that conversation of, like, when people ask me like, what is mental performance training, I say, well, it's just training your mind so it works for you versus against you, because there's really nothing in between. It's like it's either helping you or it's not. And the first step in that is understanding like what the heck is going on between the ears, so that you can identify, like, is it helping me or is it not? Is it working for me or is it working against me? And I think understanding first, like, what are those some of those thoughts that are impacting the quality of your performance, is first and foremost like the number one thing you can do. Now you can do that through journaling, like I said, you can do it through meditation, like really tuning into what's going on between the ears. Um, and I think, like, the hard part is sometimes when we're trying to build our own self awareness, like, we see ourselves and our own performance perhaps a little bit skewed or distorted. So we have to rely on other people too. And it's a little bit counterintuitive when you think about it. It's like self-awareness, you're looking in the mirror, but also like you should use your coaches and you should use your friends and like you should use like trusted people to give you like honest feedback and go like, this is actually where you're at. And using all of that data, whether you think about it or someone else gives it to you, like, that feedback is so invaluable, because we're going to see ourselves perhaps in a different light, and the goal is to get to accurate self-awareness. Like, that's like the gold standard, because The truth is, like, you can lie to yourself about where you're at, and that's not self-awareness at all. So being able to like bring in trusted people, like I said, coaches or teammates or friends, to really supplement all of the work that you do yourself. That's the first thing you do, is build that self awareness, and then from there, like once you realize where you're at, find different ways to build your confidence. And like the easiest, like again, I'm just kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit because I think confidence is such a foundational piece to really being a consistent and like having a really strong mental game is the confidence. And we know that the best form of confidence comes from like really, really quality, challenging preparation. Like how well you get after it in the cage, on the field, in the weight room, really anything when you're getting yourself, your mind and body ready. When you do that with intention and it's challenging, and sometimes it doesn't look pretty, that's the best way to build your confidence. Because when you step into the game, it's like, well, shoot, like I've already trained this really hard and I'm ready for this. And like, there's nothing for anyone who's played the game, there's nothing better than stepping into the box or behind the plate and you're like, I'm actually ready for this, and you believe it. Like that is so powerful. For kids that are starting high school or going to college or starting at a new level or playing your first travel ball game, it's like there's going to be some uncertainty. It's like, shoot, do I belong here? And there's nothing better to be able to answer that question with like, yes, I've trained, I'm prepared. That's confidence, right? So I wanted to give that example because though people may not have like formally trained the mental game, I would bet that people have had that experience where they're like, I'm lacking experience, I'm lacking confidence, or I have it. That's the mental game. And it's just being really intentional about how you build your confidence and how you build your self-awareness, and just continuously, it's a continuous process. You'll never get to the point where you're like, I'm self-aware, check that box. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you just got to keep going, man. You just got to keep going, keep taking notes of what's going on, because things change, your skills change, the game changes, the level changes. Um, so long-winded way of saying like it's you should never stop building your self-awareness and never stop trying to build your confidence. Continuously train, prepare on purpose, because there's nothing better than being able to step on the field and truly feel like reliably confident.
For sure. And I use the example of like just taking a test in school. I
Yep.
tell kids all the time, I'm like, when you studied all week for that test, how do you feel walking into the test? You're like, yeah, let's go, bring it, teach. I got every answer you need.
Yeah.
And then when you don't study or you're trying to cram late, and then you just have all this anxiety walking in. And obviously it's that difference. I remember Augie Garrido used to talk about fear versus confidence, was like, he's like, baseball is fear versus confidence. That's what it is. And I think, not so much like there's kind of a fake it till you make it piece of that, of kind of like the self talk. Talk a little bit about, you've kind of, let's figure out who we are. So a little bit of self awareness and understanding that and getting some things on paper. Talk about self talk and just how we can, utilize our own thoughts and then kind of combating them ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's good. And to the Augie Garrido piece, I heard this quote a while back. It's like confidence is the antidote to fear, and it's like that's so true. It's like the thing about this game, and I'll get to the question about like self talk, but the thing about this
Mm-hmm.
game is there's so much uncertainty. Like if you think about it objectively, the game itself, let's just say a 9 inning game has 220 pitches on average. In fact, I think that's the number, if I remember correctly from the last time I looked. It's about 220-ish pitches, 250-ish, somewhere around there. It's like you actually never know what's happening on the next pitch. Never. You never know. So like you can either be fearful or confident about what's going to happen on the next pitch, and it's really up to you. And like if you're playing from a place of fear, you're probably going to be, like you said, riddled with anxiety. You're going to be worrying about too much. You're going to be thinking too much. That's an experience that's really common for players. Instead of like attacking it with from a place of confidence, like confidence is the antidote to fear, and that's really it is. And it all depends on how you get yourself ready. On the self-talk piece, it's like I think when it comes to managing your thoughts and managing that time between pitches, like I alluded to a little bit earlier, it's all about being really intentional with your thought process. So when you utilize your self-talk, shoot, plan out, give or take, what you want to say to yourself way ahead of time, so that when you're in the heat of the moment of the game, and like there's runners at second base, it's a tie ball game, and there's 2 outs, and you're stepping into the box, like you're not trying to figure out like, huh, what should I be thinking right now? Because you're not going to be thinking clearly. You're not.
Yeah.
So like if you go ahead of time, like the night before, the 2 days before, and go like, okay, I'm going to visualize myself in this situation with a runner at second base and a tie ball game and 2 outs, and I'm stepping into the box. What do I want to be saying to myself in that moment so that when it happens, it's almost like you get a little grin. You're like, ha, I've already seen myself do this in my mind. And again, like what I just explained there is like the combination of like the self-talk and the visualization of like seeing yourself do it in your head, but also pre-planning and pre-planting that thought ahead of time, that intentional, helpful thought that's going to help your mind work for you, just like I alluded to earlier, so that when you step in the box, you're going to have way more confidence. So just want to pause. It's like understanding that like in that 2 sentence thing I just said, there's self-talk, there's visualization, there's confidence, and there's routines kind of all built into it. So it's really important to understand that it's not like you did your self-talk work and you can check off the mental game. It's like it's constantly working, it's constantly changing. There's like crazy changing dynamic to everything that you're talking about because our mind is very, very complex. So and again reinforces this idea that whatever we're doing physically, there's always something mentally going on. So there, you cannot separate the two. So you have to be able to be aware of what's going on mentally while you're doing something physically, and that'll help you just be way more intentional by pre-planting those self-talk thoughts or visualization images in your mind, so that you can just step in the box or behind the plate or on the mound just way more confident. And that's it's an absolute game changer. But it really boils down to just being really purposeful and intentional about what's going on through the ears. Because if you leave your thoughts to chance, I would bet that your mind is probably going to work against you more so than it's going to work for you. It's just
Yeah.
being intentional with it.
For sure. And I think also understanding that that's a process too. Like,
Yes.
it's, you're not just going to all of a sudden walk in and be like, oh, I thought about this situation last night. Now I'm going to hit a home run. But I thought, we had John Baker on. I don't know if you're familiar with Bake.
Yeah.
And he brought up a really good point. We were talking. He said, you know, clear your mind as much as you can. And I think there's like a misconception to the idea of like, oh, just clear your mind, like it's like, well, that's pretty much impossible to just have zero thought, right? And then we talk about like, this day and age of athlete that has way more distractions, has way more like is kind of like creating the ADD and then inside themselves of always having phones and things like that. So it's like I think there needs to be a little less expectation on that and more the idea of like, don't clear the mind. Let's just shift the focus of the mind.
Yes. That was very well said. It's like we're always going to be thinking something, so let's shift it to what something that's going to be way more helpful for us. And like again, like that like experience, like players tell me all the time, like Kellen, like how can I think less or how can I not think? It's like, well, it's like it's more about minimizing the thoughts and maximizing the number of thoughts that you control. Like that's really what it's about. It's
I love that.
minimizing the number and maximizing the ones that you control, because you're not gonna control every single thought that pops in your head. Like I will tell you that right now. But if you're just way more intentional with what you're planting in your mind, that's how you control it more. And that's how you be way more in control of your mind and body when you're trying to do something that just on the surface doesn't make sense. Like I remind people jokingly, but like the game of baseball is wild. It's like you're trying to hit a round object with a round object. Like that makes no sense, like objectively. And for the catchers, it's like you have a ball flying your direction and you don't actually know what direction it's going to go. You don't know if it's going to start here and end here. You don't know if it's going to go like this. Like, no offense to the pitchers, but sometimes they don't even know where the ball is going to go and what it's going to do, especially on the younger age, and they're learning all these different pitch types and shapes and stuff. And it's wild. So like I use that kind of jokingly, but at like the core of it's real. It's like you don't truly know what you don't know what's gonna come your way. So the only thing you can control is yourself. Like that's it. That's it. And the if you have control of your mind and body, you're going to give yourself a better chance to manage the uncertainty of the game. Like that's really what it's about. whether you're on defense or offense. That principle is completely spot on. And again, I just made it sound super easy because I don't have gear on right now, and I don't have pitches coming every which direction. So I completely empathize with that. But that's the truth of like the more you can control your mind and body, the better chance you have to just reach your full potential in that moment and be able to like be as consistent as you can. And though it doesn't guarantee success, it just increases your chance of getting that success.
And I think too many times there's that self awareness piece. Like I know for me personally, like my mind is always going. Like I'm always thinking, and I'm just very cerebral in how it works, right? Like I don't ever have the like, oh, just turn your brain off. Like I don't get to do that. You know, it's just not in my capacity, right? So it's like some people can do that. Some people can like just kind of go brain dead, and we always talk about kind of like brain dead hitters that like don't really think much. They just see it hit it, there's obviously both can be very successful. It's just understanding oneself and how to deal with that. And I think now I'm trying to manage my life as different as a baseball career, which is like can I get sleep at night and calm my brain down. And it's like literally doing exercises with myself, laying in bed going, all right, that's a tomorrow problem, cross it off your list. Can't control that right now, cross it off your list. I'm addicted to golf at this point in my life. I mean, the amount of mental struggles I got to deal with there, right? But it's a constant evolution of figuring out my best capacity to deal with this. And I think too many times like everything else in sport, we pinpoint as to like one answer of how things should be done. And the reality is like we're all different. So when you're like attacking guys, how do you kind of attack them in the way that they are all different in how their brains operate?
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece. I mean, specifically to my job, but I think coaching in general. It's like you get a group of players, and your job is to make all of them better. And it's like, shoot, like here's like, and you have limited time, limited space. There's all these limitations right around coaching. And I think like leaning into the individuality and the uniqueness of each player allows them to flourish a lot better. And I think like this is more just like general coaching, but have your fundamentals, the like the pillars or the like the non-negotiables in another way to say it, and then be able to find ways to apply those principles, those pillars, and those non-negotiables to each individual player. And I think like if you think about any skill, whether it's throwing the ball to second base or hitting the ball the other way or executing a slider, it's like there are probably some fundamentals that coaches hold on to and like, you know what? I believe this to be the thing. This has helped guys be more consistent. And then within that like belief system, you can find different variations to go like, okay, like this might work for this player. And the same thing applies on the mental side of the game. It's like if I had to give you like one foundational or like pillar for me, it's being able to manage those time between pitches intentionally so that your mind can work for you versus against you. Like I've already said it, but that's kind of like if I had to put it in one sentence, like that's what I would go for. So within that framework or that structure of managing the time, it's like okay, well, I can't like write a prescription of what they should do and like give it to them. Like that just doesn't work. They're just gonna tune me out. But I can go like okay, so first of all, I know that being able to get in control of your mind and body is incredibly beneficial. So let's find a way, a set of skills or a strategy or two that you can go to on a pitch to pitch basis that allows you to be in that space. Whether that's finding a focal point, taking a breath, something visualization really quickly, like something along those lines. Like I can offer up suggestions with the framework of control of mind and body first and foremost is number one priority. And then the second piece is like there's always some type of element of identifying your plan for the next pitch. On the pitching side, it's like, what's my pitch type to a specific location, given the count, given the handedness of the hitter? Cool. And I think catchers have to think about that too. Like that's certainly part of their process. But there's also like on the hitting side, it's like, okay, well, I'm looking for a fastball outer half to hit it the other way on a line. Like there's some type of strategy or tactical piece of the game that should be incorporated in that time between pitches. It's not all about taking breaths. It's not all about visualization. You have to acknowledge the tactical side of the game to be successful. And then finally, like the third piece is like finding a way to fully commit yourself and fully focus on that particular plan for the next pitch. And it's like the result of full commitment is full focus. So the word commit is really really important here. It's like, how can I get myself fully, like, all in 100%, like zero doubt in my mind in that plan that I've already identified, and how can I commit myself to that plan? So then again, kind of just walk you through very much how I would coach somebody managing that time between pitches, but I can't do it the same way with every player. It's like, you have to have the mind and body control piece. There has to be some plan or element to it, and there has to be some way of like fully focusing and committing to that plan. And there's a million different variations of what that might look like for players. And I have to be able to, one, just to guide them. I'm just a guider. I just guide them in a certain way, and I go like, this has been helpful for other guys. Or shoot, some guys just forget what works for them, and I'm like, well, what have you done in the past, especially in the pro game? It's like, what have you done in the past to be successful? And they'll, rattle off a bunch of things, and they're like, dude, Kellen, thanks so much, that was awesome. I'm like, dude, I didn't say anything. I just asked you the question of what you've done in the past, and you in your mind gave yourself your own answer. And I know, like, you've had Tony Arnerich on here before, and like, I know one thing we've talked about a lot as an organization, like professional reminders. Like, that's like, that to me is exactly what I just explained. Sometimes I just ask the right question and they just remind themselves, and I didn't say anything, but they think I gave them something. In reality, I just asked the right question. So again, just kind of giving some insight as to how these conversations go for players, for myself or with myself. And um, sometimes I do more guiding and coaching. Sometimes I do just let more question asking, and it really depends on the level of self awareness, the level of like where these guys are at, because it's very different working with like a freshly drafted 18-year-old kid versus a 26-year-old minor league vet. Like those are two very different people, but I still want them to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to manage that conversation very differently.
Yeah, it's been interesting over the years. We've had, just pro guys in the off season come work out at our shop, and it's so amazing. It's almost like the older they get, the less they do, because everything's so much more concentrated. It's like they know exactly what they need to do that day. Like, we have like the minor league guys would come in here. What's up, man? What'd you do last night? Blah, blah, blah. The big league guys, they just walk past everybody, like get into the cage, get to work. And it was like, there was just no bullshitting. It was like, hey, and I think there's a difference in, some of them have families compared to others not, so it's the idea of like, hey man, I got 2 hours before I got to get back to go pick up my kid. I got to manage this time. And I think managing time as a pro athlete is easier. That's your job. So you get to manage it all. We get athletes here that, our education system still thinks they need to be in school for 7 hours a day and then hand them 3 hours of homework every night. But then we're telling them, you got to get to the gym 3-4 times a week, and you got to be in here doing your skill work. And then now we're adding this component of, oh, hey, figure out some mental training too. How do you work with, I know you're working mostly with pro guys, but if you were with younger guys, how do you work with just managing your time and the mental capacity that takes too?
Man, that is such a hard question to answer, because like, to your point, like, I would never want to take them away from those really important things like their schoolwork and like their skill work. And that's why you have to be able to sprinkle it in there. So if guys want to start and they feel limited on time or constrained on time, you can I would be confident to say you can find time, like 5 to 10 minutes a day, to put some thoughts on paper, write down that process, how you're going to manage that time between pitches, and just revisit it. Like, if you do nothing else, having some self-awareness and giving yourself a very clear plan on how to manage that time between pitches, you're doing more than most of the population, right? Especially in the high school world, especially in like the travel youth world, you're doing way more than everybody else. So like, and then I think on top of that, if you find a little additional, few minutes here and there, like, practice your breathing, practice focusing on one thing at a time. The skill of focusing on one thing at a time, that's the separator. Because think about how fast our mind races. Thoughts pop in, they pop out. I mean, in this conversation, we've probably had thousands of thoughts and we don't really realize it. And if I can train myself to be able to lock in on one thing, like right now, I'm just looking at my water bottle. I'm just practicing focusing on one thing, and then I shift back to this. Like, anyone listening to this can practice focusing on one thing at a time. And that skill set allows you to be more consistent pitch to pitch. So you don't need to necessarily, sit down with someone and have an hour long conversation to work on your mental game. You can do it at any moment of any day, all day long. Just finding the ways to be intentional with your thoughts, shifting your focus around an environment. I'll use a non-baseball example. Think about a quarterback reading the defense. It's like the skill of being able to shift his focus around the defense to identify the right play, or shoot, we called the right play. Let's go full go and run this play. That's a skill of being able to focus on one thing at a time and understand where people are at. On the catching side, like understanding where your defense is and making adjustments and shifting, like that's like more of a broad style of focus, but you're practicing shifting your focus from one thing to another. And that's something you can do just sitting at home, watching TV, outside, doing different things. Like you can find ways to train your mind without having these like lengthy conversations or listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video. Like certainly that stuff works, or reading a book. Like you can do that and certainly get better, but really think about like, how am I practicing focusing on one thing at a time? Because that in itself is one of the most valuable skill sets you can give yourself.
Yeah, I mean, for young athletes, it's like, hey, can you just and again, don't have super high expectations. Like, I'm gonna pay attention to my teacher for this whole class, but it might be like, hey, I'm gonna literally lock in. Like the clock right now says 8:50. I'm gonna literally lock in on everything they're saying for 10 minutes, and
Yes.
then you know what? Like, I might miss a thing or two and zone out for a little bit, but just like by the time you do that more and more, all of a sudden it becomes okay. Well, now, dang, dude, I'm pretty good at like 20 minutes. I can handle pretty easily without like minds, going. And I think if you can start to like, if athletes can start to understand, this is a conversation we try to have with them when it starts to get real, right? When they get to be sophomores, juniors, and they're like, they want to play at the next level. This wants to be something that they really want to do. It's the idea of like, you're no longer a kid playing baseball, like you're a baseball player. And the difference is everything that you do in your life now affects you as an athlete. So what you eat and who you hang around and all your extracurricular activities, and you might have to miss some social activities and things like that because you've made the commitment. But at the end of the day, like there's also the idea that we all hate school. Like I don't think anybody's going to sit here and try to convince anybody that hey, you just got to love school. Look, there's a process. You love school when you're studying what you care about. Like we all have to study crap we don't care about.
Yeah.
And so we got to figure it out. But man, that's an incredible mental test for us to be like, can I figure out how to get an A in this class that I freaking hate so much? Like that's a mental challenge. And this teacher is so boring and I can't stand listening to her talk, but can I just lock in for 20 minutes? And I think if the mindset can change, like, dude, this is who you are. Like literally every single decision you make is affecting you as an athlete, not just as, normal high school student.
That's such a good example of like forcing yourself to lock in completely on one thing, like class. Like that will help you be a better baseball player. Like I with all my heart, I can like confidently say that like that on the surface, if you look at it, you're like, this has nothing to do with baseball. But bring it back to the skill of focusing on something that is very easily like during the game, you can easily get distracted. During class, you can easily get distracted. That's the same thing. And challenging yourself in that, I think that's such a good example and a great suggestion for anyone listening or any kids looking to like be better at focusing. Like that's what we're talking about. Just be better at focusing. And that's a really high quality repetition of practicing focusing. Just like you do a set of receiving off of a velo machine for guys behind the plate. Like that's a really high quality repetition on the catching side of building skill. But it's like on the mental side, being able to focus better, finding ways to drill focusing better is a high quality repetition. And I really want the listeners to like understand that those two are equally important. So why would you ever not practice focusing? That's like the rhetorical question that I want to pose to everybody.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think too, like just, giving yourself some time to not focus too, like it's like I get home, and we're talking about baseball and softball, and it's like, it's great, right? Like, we obviously want these kids, but all these things are like, I'm going to be completely honest. There's definitely times I don't want to be here at work. Like, there's definitely times I'm on my 15th lesson of the day, but guess what? It's that guy's first lesson. So I got to mentally figure out how to get to that guy and make him better in that time that he's here. So it's the idea of like, this doesn't change throughout your life. Like, it's very difficult to manage all of your thoughts in life and every single day. And, I mean, I've started, businesses, and that's, let me tell you, the anxiety that comes with that and the battles I've had with myself of like, am I a dumbass? Did I do something really stupid by trying to do this? I mean, this is like really life serving stuff. And I think that, obviously we want them to kind of understand that it's just, how do you maximize yourself as a baseball player or softball player and continue that growth. But the reality is if you don't get to the big leagues, which is obviously a very small percentage of people, uh, you're not a failure. You're way more destined for success later in your life.
Yeah, I that example of like the 15th lesson really resonates with me because I think about like spring training's right around the corner. And if for the listeners like not really familiar with what it looks like for staff members, it's the coolest time of the year for fans. It is grindy for coaches,
Oh yeah, I believe
grind
it.
and players, like super grindy. And I'll give you an example. One thing I think we do really good as an organization is like build out our player development plans for our players. And like we bring in all different opinions. We bring in the analysts, we bring in the hitting coaches, we bring in the catching coaches for the catchers. Like the mental skills coaches are involved in this conversation. And we just identify what's the best plan for these players. And then we deliver it to the players and like communicate like this is what we believe is going to help you take a step towards becoming a big leaguer. And some of those days during spring training are really long, but it's the only time we're all together. So we have to deliver those meetings to these players. And it might be my sixth player plan meeting of the day, but it's like that's his only one for the entire year. So I
Mm-hmm.
have to be on my game. Like I have to be able to like deliver like my mental skills component or just be present in the conversation well enough to where that player walks away like inspired, ready to rock and roll, like super motivated and believing in the plan that we put out for him. Like that matters. So like that like your 15th lesson of the day totally reminds me of that experience of like, dude, I am exhausted. I just want to go lay on the couch at the end. It's long day after a long day of spring training, but like I have 3 player plan meetings that I need to be like my A game needs to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And that is purely due to like our saying our as coaches, like our ability to be focused on what matters in that moment, regardless of how we feel. And that skill certainly rings true outside of this game into life. And that example couldn't have resonated with me more.
And I think you have to, in your kind of like time and priority management, like, I worked at College of San Mateo, and Doug Williams was so good on mental stuff. And he was also really big on time and priority management. It was like literally just take an Excel spreadsheet and put your hours of your week and like, what are you going to do all week? And like, he was really good about being like, hey, also like, this is not like stop your whole life and just be a baseball player. It's like, hey, you know what? The Niners are playing on Thursday night football. Like, guess what? Like, I'm blocking out Thursday night from 5 to 8, right? And I think like we all have to have that kind of like understanding of the rest of our life and the balance that is. And I say I like had those like I'm grinding through these days. It's like, well, when I get home, like I'm not doing anything, right? Like I'm home, it's 9 or 10. I'm laying in bed, I'm watching a TV show, and like I'm trying to just nothing, right? And that for me is my time to kind of recharge and recalibrate. And then I wake up the next morning and we do it all over again. And I think too many times athletes feel like they're battling themselves of like, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. So I give in and do what I want. But then it's like, but I can't do this because it's like, there's a way to manage this all. We just have to, again, putting stuff on paper is massively important. But like literally, if you just outline what your week should look like, good stuff and the tough stuff, I think is massively important. How much of that do you kind of piece in there in terms of them like mentally? I get to actually think like we talk about multi-sport athletes in here a lot, and a lot of it is well, it's good for their bodies. I'm like, yeah, but like they're also in these like they feel pressured to get a scholarship. They're playing a million games. Like I also want them to just go play football in the fall so that they just turn their baseball brain off for 3 months and let's come back to it when it's time? How do you manage kind of like just not 100% of the time, figure out how to enjoy the rest of it too?
Yeah, that's a hot topic with us, our coaching staff, and our player development system as well. It's like we want to make sure that we're maximizing these players' potential and their skill set. And the truth is, like, their careers are short, so we have to take advantage of every moment that we can. With that said, there's also this balance of, like, if we're just bombarding them 24/7 with Mariner stuff, or read this article or watch this video, it's like they're going to feel suffocated and lose the motivation and the drive that we need them to have. So it's like it's really finding this balance of, like, asking ourselves, like, is this going to be something that's going to be beneficial for them, slash, can it wait? Like, can it wait till we see him in the clubhouse the next day?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to send this text at 10:30 at night after an affiliate game when I'm going to see the dude in 12 hours and 12 o'clock p.m. the next day? Like, can this wait? Right? Let him have his morning, and then when he gets to the clubhouse, go like, hey, dude, like, I got something for you. Come over here. And guess what? He's probably going to be more open to it. He's probably going to listen to it because he's refreshed. He had his time away. He spent it with his girlfriend or his friends or his buddies or his teammates, and they didn't even talk about baseball. They watched a football game, like you said. Like, you have to be able to find that balance, and I encourage guys to, like, find something else. Whether it's playing cards or playing a video game, or like video games, hot topic, right? It's like, how much time do we want these guys wasting time on video games? But it's like there's actually some validity and, like, some like that could be helpful, right? Maybe not playing all night, 8 hours a night, like not sleeping. Like, there's a balance there, but, like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe cut yourself off. You know what? I'm going to give myself 2 hours of video games just to veg out, go to sleep, and be ready to play the next day. Like, cool. If guys want to use that, awesome. Like, who am I going to judge? Who am I to tell them that's not an efficient use of their time? And again, really, really specific examples to the pro game and what during the season looks like. But I think also for the high school kids, it's like being intentional. It all goes back to what I was talking about earlier, being intentional with your time and your decisions, and telling yourself, like, okay, this is my time to recover mentally and physically. I need to go do whatever. I need to go on a walk. I need to talk to my girlfriend on the phone. I need to, spend time with my family, whatever that looks like. I can't encourage that enough. And being able to, like, fluctuate between, all right, this is time to work and this is time to recover. And I think being intentional and identifying that purpose ahead of time allows you to be way more efficient with your time, with your priorities, and ultimately with your focus. Like, that's what we're talking about, is just shifting your focus to different things and giving yourself a very clear intent and purpose of your priorities. It's a total game changer.
No, for sure. And I think I want to dive a little bit into like the coaching aspect. And, I think I could go on a massive rant on the state of youth athletics in general, but baseball especially. And, I think we need to get back to Little League. We need to get back to some of these community deals. And, with that comes the difficulty of volunteer coaches, parent coaches, people that don't have a ton of experience in this. And we're doing a coaches clinic here soon for a Little League. And I'm just wondering, what is your advice on, for me, it's always about expectation. I think we just put too much expectation on kids when, again, this game is really hard. The brain is not fully developed at 10, 11, 12 years old. What's an advice you would give a dad who's coaching Little League just on, what they can add to the kids for a mental perspective? But honestly, like, I'm more concerned about like what you think that they can do for themselves mentally to make sure that they're, benefiting the kids.
Oh man, I could go on for another hour. Like you said, I could talk a lot about this because I have two young kids. My son's played Little League for a handful of years, and my daughter is going to play T-ball this year. Can't wait to see how that all plays out. Um, and, like, as someone who, like, I wish I could coach. I'll preface that. Like, I wish I could coach Little League and help out. My schedule just doesn't allow it. Like, I really wish I could. So I mentioned I actually did a coaches clinic for my son's Little League this weekend, and, like, I tried to sprinkle in some, like, the physical skill set and, like the drill work, but also, like, I really wanted to weave in a lot of what we're talking about on this conversation. And if I had to boil it down to, like, one thing or a couple things that I would share, or that I shared and would share with coaches, um, is like, as a coach, I think it's really, really important to understand that you are the environment creator for your team. Like, whether that's in the dugout, whether that's during practice or during a game, you create the environment for your team. And it's really, really important to understand, like, what is the impact of the environment that I'm creating on these kids? If I'm, for example, getting angry after every error, think about the environment that creates for the kids. That's going to create pressure. That's going to create them trying to do too much. That's going to create an insane amount of fear of messing up. And like, let's be real. Little League is about messing up and screwing up and making a ton of mistakes and learning about a really awesome game. And that environment of like getting frustrated or angry about after an error is just going to drive kids away. Like that's really what it's going to do. Um, so like when you're coaching, just be mindful of that environment that you're creating for these kids. You know, are you encouraging them or are you always calling them out for their mistakes? And that's not to say that like I'm not telling you to not address and not help a kid get better if they make a mistake. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like how you deliver that message really matters because that's going to create their experience. It's like, finding a time or place. An example I use at the coaches clinic was, imagine you're in the third base dugout and your second baseman boots a ball. I would throw out there as an option of like yelling across the field that that wasn't acceptable, or that wasn't good enough, or that should be automatic. These are direct quotes that I've heard from little league coaches. That's probably not the time to do it. You can go like, hey, you're going to get the next one. Cool. Like, be ready for this next ground ball. And then when that kid comes in at the end of the inning, just like put your arm around him and go like, hey, dude, like the only reason you missed that ball is because you pulled your head out and the ball just clanked out of your glove. That was it. And then that kid's going to walk away with something they know what to do with. They know that you got their back and you're not just calling them out. You're just like helping them get better. Like that's the whole point. And that to me is going to create an environment of growth, of freedom, of these kids not feeling the pressure to perform. Again, I can go on for hours, but I think another piece that goes along with this is just the awareness that as coaches, as humans, as people, we're really, really good at what we call effective criticism of like, that wasn't good because, and then like gives them a reason why like that didn't work out or the desirable outcome didn't occur. What we really suck at is effective praise. And I use this as an example of like I'm playing golf with my buddies, like, and I'm trying to figure out how to be a halfway decent, serviceable golfer. And I finally hit one perfect, right down the fairway, perfect shot. And all my buddies go, "Hey, dude, nice shot, cool, nice shot." That doesn't help me. You're just telling me what I did. What effective praise is that was a good shot because you kept your head down and you stayed through the ball. Gave me two strategy based pieces of feedback that I'm like, oh, cool. I need to keep my head down and stay through the ball to be able to create that success again. So I would challenge you that like effective praise and effective criticism takes the same amount of effort from a coaching standpoint, but we're so used to going like, hey, dude, nice swing. Hey, dude, nice play. Hey, nice block on the catching context. But it's like that was a nice block because you did this, you did this, you did this, based on what you observed, because you're sending the message that you're paying attention and that you want them to actually repeat the success. Because if we only focus on like results based feedback, like the good job or that was great, they're not going to walk away with the process based feedback that actually created the success in the first place. So like if I had to give two things, I know you said one, but two is like be mindful of the environment that you're creating as a coach because that's your job. Like that's up to you. And then on this piece of like very specific from a coaching standpoint of like we're already really good of saying that was not very good because and like telling them how to fix it or correct it. What we need to be better, we collectively, is like that was good because and give them why it was good so that they know how to repeat it. And it doesn't really take much more effort. It's just being mindful of like, I'm used to saying good shot on the golf course, where it should be like, that was a good swing because you were balanced, you stayed powerful, you stayed through the middle of the field. Whatever it sounds like, doesn't really take a lot of extra effort. It's just you making a choice to effectively praise, just like we effectively criticize. So that's like the two big things I would say from a coaching standpoint that I think expedites the development on the praise piece, but also just like being mindful of the environment you create, I think will hopefully help coaches make really good decisions and how they communicate, what they emphasize, what they highlight, what they talk about, because that really matters.
No, I love that. It's so funny because this, there's a every dad who's coaching little league, like they are successful in something. They have a job and they're work hard and whatever, and they all had to work really hard to be where they're at. And I think it's like we all think that like I can just jump in and coach and like, oh, I've watched some baseball or I played in high school or even played at college or whatever. Like it doesn't make you equipped to coach players, right? And I think there's a lot of that idea of like I tell the coaches all the time, like, hey, if I needed a lawyer, I could go on Google and I could try to figure it out on my own, but there's no way I'm going to get the success as if I called a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's too many times where it's like, it's okay to have limitations on what you actually know baseball wise. It's not okay to have limitations on your attitude and the culture that you're creating and things like that. And I think that's the part where it the fine line of like, their wins and losses are zero reflection on you. Like their smiles on their face and the way that they carry themselves in their character, that can have a reflection of you. And I think there just needs to be more of the, what is the culture I'm creating?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I've also heard this to speak to that point of like little league coaches or youth coaches saying like, "Hey Johnny, I need you to do something." It's like, do you need them to do really anything for you right now? It's like, as a coach, it's not about you. It's like it's about the kid. And this is a total rabbit hole side conversation, but like you could argue that like in the pro space, like we as pro coaches need our players to get better, because if they don't get better and perform, like we lose our job. But like I'll tell you this right now, we don't ever talk that way. We don't say to a young 21-year-old kid who just got drafted, like, "Hey dude, I need you to get to the big leagues to make me look good." It's like we would never say that. And like the truth, there's some truth and there's probably some lie we've woven into that statement. So like my rhetorical question is to the little league coaches, like, do you need your players to do anything for you? It's like, just answer yourself that question. Like, you don't need anything. It's like you can tell them how to get it, what to do, encourage them, but it's like, do you need them? And think about the impact and the environment you create with that message. It's like that creates so much pressure, undue, unnecessary pressure when you're like, I need you to do something or you have to do something. It's like, man, like imagine as a 10-year-old kid who really doesn't understand like the impact of words and like just listening to what they hear, like they're not going to be able to manage those emotions that you're creating or creating that environment that's fueling those emotions in those kids. They don't understand emotions as well as adults do. Like that's
Yeah.
just the truth, right? And um I can think of countless examples with my son, like talking through like his experience with playing sports and baseball, and it's like even him that I talk about this stuff all the time, like he still gets confused about like what emotion he's experiencing or like how to describe what's going on, because the kids aren't equipped with that emotional intelligence that adults are, so or adults have. So long story short of like just being really mindful of like the messaging that you have as a coach, because it really does have an impact on the kids. It really does.
Yeah. Just like, opportunity, understanding what opportunity is, right? I think like when I was coaching, a team and like kid come up in a big situation, I mean, I'd be third base box smiling, being like, man, how fucking cool is this, dude?
Yeah.
Bases loaded, 2 outs in the ninth, dude. How many times you done this in your backyard? Let's have some fun, like.
Yes.
And instead, I just see these coaches, clap, 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 come on, yeah, like so intense. It's like, dude, don't act like they don't care. Don't act like they don't have their own pressures they're putting on themselves. Don't act like they can't look around and see all the people watching and see their teammates and everything. Like they act like you're the only one that is applying this to them. Like they have their own thoughts. They already feel certain ways. When they make an error, they're already embarrassed. They
Yep.
already feel like shit. Like they don't need to be told how bad an error it was. Like they
Right.
know, and I think that's one thing that I always love about when I get around spring training or the pro game in general. It's like coaches are not yelling and screaming because guess what? These players know, like, I better
They know.
learn how to make that play or I'm not going to get to where I need to get to, right?
Yep.
And so the conversation becomes, hey coach, how do I get to that play? Like, I can't make this play. I need help. Like, how do I get there? And it's just not this like constant, like, hey man, like 40,000 people are watching. I'm not sure if you're paying attention, but like, there's a lot of people here. And like, this is relying on, it's like, oh really? They didn't fucking know that, you know? I mean, it's just amazing sometimes that we
Yeah.
lose sight of like the thought that they have their own brains and their own thoughts and they understand the situations.
Yeah, that's such a good example, and it's true. Like and to speak to that, like guys want to be coached, like they really do. Like no matter what level, like they want to find a way to get better, and like you don't have to be like the rah rah cheerleader. Like let's go, coach. It's like be a good truth teller, be a good communicator, find a way to connect with the players that you work with, and identify what makes them tick and find a way to make them better. Like that, if nothing else as a coach, like that should be your focus, and nothing has to do with like putting undue pressure on themselves because like you said, they understand they're the ones competing in the game. Like they're the ones that already have the pressure. As a
Mm-hmm.
coach, you shouldn't feel that. Like that's not your pressure to feel. And like I think we sometimes as coaches feel like we want our people to succeed so bad. Like and I'm so guilty of this too, where like I get so emotionally invested in someone's performance that like I have to check myself sometimes and go like, okay, like I still need to be at my best when that kid needs to be coached. Even though like I care so much about this one kid, like there's multiple kids that are just popping in my head of our young players of like spending so much time with them, having conversations with them, and then I go out almost like a nervous parent and watch them play. It's like, gosh, like I want them to be so good, but like me wanting them to be so good and me feeling the pressure is only making me worse as a coach because I might miss something that I can give them to help them be better in the long run because I'm so invested in what they're doing, emotionally attached to their own performance, and I have to be able to like objectively see what's happening so I can give him the feedback that's going to ultimately make him better in the long run because that's the most important piece. So like I even have to check myself and go like, okay, like I'm not the one performing here. Like it's him. This is about him. Like he's the hero of this story. It's not me. And I can care. I can care about his story certainly, and I should, but I have to be able to manage those moments as the coach effectively so I can be better for him in the long run. Whether it's like I said, a follow up conversation or coach him in the moment or, chirping something from the dugout that he knows exactly what I mean, like something like that. Like those are super powerful moments. And I have to be at my best to know, like, to have the feel of like know what to do and when to say it. But if I'm emotionally invested as much as I have been in the past, sometimes like I could miss those moments. And I think that applies to on like little league coaching too. Like if you're so emotionally invested in what's going on and not seeing it for what it is, you might create an environment full of pressure for these kids. And that's on a much smaller scale, but I think it's true.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this has been awesome. I've been trying to get some mental guys on this thing for a while, and you're the first one, and it's been just amazing. I truly appreciate you being on. If you haven't listened to the show, our last segment is called Baseball Bites. It's brought to you by Black Bear Diner, and we ask every guest what their favorite place to eat is along their baseball journey. So it could be maybe something from growing up, maybe like somewhere along the road, you've had to go visit some of these minor league guys. Give me one spot that pops into your head.
Oh man, that is such a hard question because I love food. Um, let's see. I think this might be an unpopular or popular choice, especially certainly popular with our players, but you can never go wrong with Chipotle. You always know what you're going to get. There's usually one nearby. In fact, I think during spring training this year, there's a Chipotle right near our complex. I'll probably at least once a week stop on my way home to grab a Chipotle. So shout out Chipotle. You always know what you're going to get. The consistency's there, the quality's there, and I will say it's a very popular option amongst our minor league players, especially our international guys. They love Chipotle. So shout out Chipotle.
Yeah, and they, decently healthy. I mean, you can make it healthy. Obviously, they're cooking it, probably in a bunch of oils and shit that aren't good for you. But yeah,
Yeah.
but like the actual, it's like, hey, rice and meat and
Yeah.
guacamole that's $5 extra. I mean, you add all that together, it's decently healthy. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, man. Honestly, truly incredible stuff. I'm so excited for our listeners to be able to tap in a little bit to that mental side. And wish you the best of luck this year.
I appreciate it, Brett. It was a good conversation, and I look forward to listening back and tuning in to future episodes. So thanks.
You bet. Thank you. If you enjoyed that, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll have a new episode for you every single Tuesday here on our YouTube channel and wherever you listen to podcasts.